He is built like a strong statue with a face that could stop traffic. Feels like the perfect body. Even your heart's own friend can't stop staring at him. I'm afraid she won't make it through today. With his perfect body, he showed the girl something so huge that she was left wide-eyed and drooling. A massive dungeon crystal heavy at 2 pounds. I know exactly what you were thinking, you dirty-minded prick. The girl is frozen in shock, realizing that a crystal that pure and big could only be found in the most dangerous dungeons. To this day, just 5 S-rank dungeons in the whole country have ever been conquered. How could a nobody like him possess something so rare? You might be wondering how someone with such a strong body could still be considered a loser. So, let's rewind and start the story all over again. He was merely a crystal scavenger who cleaned up the remains for other hunters after a dungeon run. Basically, he was a bum who survived by stealing scraps from everyone else. That's because he woke up in a world where he had no powers at all. So, he had no way to learn anything at all. At least, he hasn't walked this path alone. That is truly a massive thing. That friend helps him pick through scraps for food, which is why she was so excited about the giant stone they found. But that tiny pebble was only worth about $30. For him, it felt like just another day where he failed. But everything shifted when a lawyer showed up with news that his father had passed away and left him a surprise. The little boy can barely remember his daddy. It was just another time a father stepped out early to buy a pack of cigarettes. All he left for his son was a kind of necklace. When his friend spotted it, he called it a return stone that only works inside dungeons to help you escape. It's not just me, is it? This girl is getting more and more beautiful by the second. Even the hero is starting to feel out of his depth. I think it's time he smashes her. But right now, he's just sitting at home watching TV. The strongest hunter shared how his team took down an S-rank dungeon during an interview. That guy is loaded, looks sharp, and is gay. While the story moves on, the main character is left with only the strange object his father left behind. But when he squeezes the artifact hard, his hand starts to light up. The light shines so blindingly that he begins to panic. Then, he gets whisked away to a whole new world where a mysterious system greets him with open arms. He woke up the power flowing through his body. But until that moment, he was nothing but a nobody with no talent. Suddenly, the system shouts that he has done the impossible. He stepped into a fiery nightmare with nothing but the weakest gear anyone had ever seen. Because of that, he earned the title of SSS rank Good Luck. To make up for his low rank, the effects were made much stronger. He also took first place in the Hell difficulty ranking, earning the title of Hell's Strongest. He stands alone as the very last one left standing. Confused and lost, he began shouting for help. He's already losing his mind. But his attention quickly snapped away to a massive crystal dungeon. But he had no idea that something was about to catch him. He quickly began to spit out ketchup. He had been struck down with poison, leaving his body unable to move. His strength was fading away little by little. The system spotted it as an enemy strike, so he finally died after just 4 minutes in this world, turning into dust at level 1. No, this can't be real, he thinks, wondering if he's just dreaming it all. He's told that the mission has started and that he must stay alive until the sun comes up. Terrified, he leaps up, sprints away, and screams that this mess is terrible. Humu, driven to his breaking point, admits he doesn't know who's tormenting him, but he vows revenge on whoever is doing it. The screen flickers on to reveal a cold message. He's dead, having survived only 5 minutes. Kneeling on the floor, Kong begs God for forgiveness once more, only to hear the heartbreaking news that he has died and survived for just 11 minutes. They tell him the young man has become tougher against both the poison and the paralysis. His second idea was to clear his lungs by breathing in the dust, but that only led to another death, and after dying 14 times, he realized he lived the longest when he was just breathing normally. He tries to remember the name for the focused breathing technique Hume learned, where he was told to keep his breath low in his lungs. When he was just a kid, the boy was already able to use those special tricks. The teacher says that out of all the kids he's seen, this young man has the most promise by a long shot. Thinking hard, he sits down on the ground and tries to focus. Once more he met his end, yet this time he stayed alive for 1 hour and 41 minutes. After 28 people died, the protagonist felt odd and whispered that his body seemed too light. He wonders if his level has gone up, only for the screen to declare that his poison has hit a critical point, revealing that he has finally unlocked the ability to turn his blood poisonous and become immune to all poison damage. Startled, the young man asks what just happened. Hanmu wonders if the fine dust he breathed gave him resistance and turned his blood poisonous. The young man thought the situation was ridiculous, but as he looked around at the crystal mosses scattered everywhere, he wished they were truly real, and then the screen magically showed that his inventory was finally unlocked. As he reads the instructions, he suddenly understands that the stones along the path are actually crystal moss. Then he suddenly realizes he can do all kinds of things, and even though he is still a bit confused, he wonders what that familiar sound he has been hearing for a while is. As the noise grows louder, Himu panics and sprints away in terror, chased relentlessly by a buzzing cloud of mosquitoes. While he tries to brush the bugs off, they tell him that the boy's skills are now far stronger than his own level. Suddenly, a swarm of mosquitoes flew into the boy's mouth while he screamed in terror. The screen tells the young man he has died and that his time to live was exactly 6 hours and 18 minutes. They say he poisoned and killed more than 100 monsters all at once. Kong asks if the mosquitoes died from drinking his now poisonous blood, but they say he's changed inside and his health will keep getting worse. Hyunu panics, shouting that he's just crawled back from the dead and calling it all nonsense, while the screen flashes warnings that bacteria are rotting inside him and his health is crashing below 10%. The young man feels tired and says the system seems to be having fun all by itself. He stumbled upon a power to take things apart and didn't know how he gained it, but he figured that even though it seemed ordinary, it had really come in handy for him. Sitting on the ground, he looks around and spots a mosquito that's surprisingly big. The boy snatches up a chair to test out his new power. Once the order to take it apart is given, the chair falls into many pieces. He realizes that mastering the art of dismantling means he can learn creation. So when the screen confirms he has the new skill, Kong cheers in joy, finally understanding how things work. The young man believes he's gained rare powers and meant to act on them later, but he's going to do it right now. Humu steps out to build himself a place to rest. Holding his new power, the boy wonders how long he can keep going in that dark place and what terrifying enemies might be waiting for him there. So if he keeps going, he'll have to find a safe spot to stay. Kong decides he must spend all his crystal moss to build the shelter. He looks down, sees a newspaper on the ground, and wonders what it says before a screen pops up to tell him that the boy has just gained a common power. Language. The boy loves imagining a world full of amazing powers until he flips open the newspaper and finds a strange name called Jite Li staring back at him. Clutching the newspaper, the boy wonders if the place he's in is somehow connected to where he was before, now looking like a total ruin. With a thoughtful frown, Hyomu admits that even though he understands what's happening, he has no way to stop it right now. Without a second thought, he promises to give it his all and begins taking apart the mosquitoes. Kong later admits he's worn out from taking everything apart. He sees lots of new things around him and can't wait to figure out how to use them. A dart suddenly appears, leaving Haimu confused. So the man carefully studies it and remarks that it looks like a common item anyone could easily get. Before he does anything, he knows he has to do some research on that object. Kong stares at all the stuff he's gathered and wonders if that's really everything he has. When he turned on production, he discovered he had created a legendary egg that no one had ever seen before. As he stares at the egg and gasps at its huge size, the system warns that he must look inside to find out if there's a 50% chance it holds a living creature or nothing but death. Kong tucks the egg into his shirt, closes his eyes, and starts thinking deeply. Suddenly, a sound grabs the boy's ear, making him wonder what it might be. Then he spots a goblin lurking in the shadows. Kong freezes in shock and wonders why that strange creature is here. Before he could move, the young man realized the monster had seen him. Gazing at the stairs, the boy realizes they are his only way out. The goblin keeps chasing the young man, leaving him feeling nervous. Desperate, he checks his supplies and grabs a piece of wood to fight back against the monster. The two close the gap and start fighting with their fists. Kong quickly realizes the creature is faster than he expected. The goblin speaks out loud, shocking the hero who realizes the beast is talking again. So he quickly opens his bag and grabs some darts. He doesn't hesitate and flings them at the monster, but they only pop into bubbles on its arm without hurting it much. The goblin grabs an axe and chops off his own arm. Confused, Kong wonders if the man's arm got that way because his blood stained the dart. Thinking hard, he realizes the monster is gone. Suddenly, he spots an enemy dropping from the ceiling, and though he is pinned to the ground and spared for saying that humans still remain, the enemy walks away instead of killing him. They announce that the resistance has dropped below 10% and the boy will soon rise again thanks to the special power of his title, the Last. Kong warns that goblins are cursed and vows to get revenge on them. Still lying on the ground, they shout that the mission is done. Exhausted, Hyuno thinks back on everything that happened and how it makes him feel inside. The system tells us the young man survived his first night in hell, and the boy cheers because he made it through. With that, he pockets the silver box as his reward, but is told it'll soon be upgraded to gold. They also tell us that the return stone stays with us until the very beginning of our next mission. Hyamu cheers because he finally gets to go back to his own world after just 14 more days. When he opened his eyes, he was shocked and amazed by where the main character was. Laughing, Kong shouts with joy as he realizes he has truly made it back to his world. He reaches out and pulls the stone from around his neck. He snaps the string and yells at his dad for leaving him with such a terrible thing. Just as he was about to throw the object far away, he suddenly remembers the powerful abilities he gained in hell. A worried Yumin runs to her friend, shouting that the boy on the ground must leave before the dangerous mana poisoning makes him suffer. While the boy listens to the girl, he tries to speak to her. The young woman claims she has a tool to clean away the mana contamination. She presses the item into her friend's hands and insists he use it for safety, even though he insists it's not needed. Yum is so fed up he yells that the kid isn't taking it seriously and warns him that he'll regret it before he's even dead. After convincing himself to use it, Humu steps out of the shower and asks what day it is, only to learn that it is September 11th. Yu asks why the information left her friend confused, noting she worked alone for 2 days without contact, while Kong feels like he's been gone for years, not just 2 days. As she thought, the girl felt embarrassed and told her friend to hold back. Yum promises to pay for whatever the boy needs, but he knows he can't keep things this way, so he starts asking her where his other clothes are. She points to the dirty, ripped trash bag and says he can't wear it, then leaves the room and tells her colleague to stay quiet. The moment the woman walks out, the boy knows the system has started. Feeling a bit puzzled, he pauses to wonder what strange thing he has just seen. They explain that the gold box he received as a mission reward now holds even better treasures thanks to his Good Luck Francis title, and he has also unlocked a legendary battle assistant skill that surprises Hugh and Mo, causing him to claim that as the 8th person to get it, he joins the tiny group of only 7 others who ever held such a special power. Still puzzled, the boy wonders what a battle assistant is and whether it can really help him. Yumin came back with clothes, but she looked surprised at what she saw. She asks what her friend is up to, but he can't think of a single thing to say. Feeling shy, the girl decided to act like she hadn't seen anything happening. Later, the woman said the boy needed the hospital, but since he looked fine, she brought him home instead. Yu asks the young man if he has powers and why he works as a collector, and Kong replies that he hasn't had his power for very long. He asks his friend about the research she mentioned earlier and to check something out for him. Yu, feeling curious, asks what that object is. Who holds up the crystal moss he found, admitting he has no idea how much it's worth. The young woman stands frozen, staring at the scary sight right in front of her. The protagonist holds a heavy handful of crystal moss. He insists that because his friend is currently studying the topic, she must know more than he does. But you say there's no way it's possible, and while she stares at the crystal in wonder, the young woman asks where her friend found it, insisting that pure crystal moss is so rare it deserves a 5-star rating. Haimu wonders if his friend really meant she was a collector because of the research. Stammering, the girl nods and says yes, but the young man clarifies he won't give the stone to his friend. Instead, he'll tell her how to get his crystal moss, and Kong asks for your help selling it, while Min calls it ridiculous and notes that the boy would need more documents for a gem that pure and large, even though a smaller stone would be easier to sell. Before she could finish, Haimu snaps the stone right in half. Frustrated, the girl hits the boy, but he asks her to stop and says he found an even bigger crystal moss. When he heard this, Yu's eyes filled with tears. With a shaky voice, she asks if her friend truly has more, and he nods yes, pleading for her help to sell the moss. After she gives her word, he lays down 2 rules: that the item's origin must remain a secret and that he alone will sell it, and she agrees because it is far better than watching the crystals shattered. Yu explains that this special purity can only be found in the first dungeon, while she stares in shock as the precious crystals crumble in her hands, and Hungu says he'll decide what to do later based on how well his friend sells the treasure. He stands up, grabs his clothes from the trash bag and says he's leaving, but she invites him to stay the night at her place instead. So the next morning they wake up and he tells her he's heading to the meeting spot he set up with the buyer. A week later, the blonde girl tells her friend he doesn't need to come, but he insists on tagging along just in case something goes wrong, and she gently reminds him that the job isn't nearly as dangerous as he thinks. The protagonist wonders if asking her to do that means many people are about to lose everything. Both press on together, hunting for their next Moss client. As soon as they spot the buyer, Haimu says it's lucky he didn't go to the location alone. Yu steps up and says his partner was with him that day. Kong suddenly saw that he had been looking at the wrong person all along. As Perkiso shook Kon Hanmu's hand, he instantly realized the man was strong and knew he couldn't win in a fight. A sign stands there, warning that the boy's power has grown. After checking the moss, the man asks if he should deposit the money in the usual account, and the girl says yes. He walks away hoping to meet Kong again, leaving the protagonist feeling puzzled. You think something is wrong because the man never greeted her that way before. Humu looks at the man, wondering if he's acting strange and if he's figured out who dug up the moss. Yu laughs and asks if his friend thought they'd get robbed by the buyer. She tells him not to feel so down, reminds him that this kind of deal happens with care, asks his friend to share any other thoughts he has, and wonders how he feels about the $1 million landing in his account. Away from the scene, they ask if the deal worked, and Park Waifu nods, saying he managed to grab every single item the market had to offer. The man claims that if you pile all the moss together, it will be huge, while his companion wonders how so much moss just ended up scattered around the market. Watching the piece, the boy asks Park for his opinion, and Park replies that not only does the crystal moss possess a purity level found only in 5-star dungeons, but the young man himself looks like a strong hunter. They say the boy can stay hidden by exploring 5-star dungeons. Hint that the protagonist might be from a foreign clan with no reason to care about Korea, and while asking who negotiated the mosses and if anyone accompanied her, they agree that moving such a large amount of goods was a great feat. Park wonders how strong someone must be to gather that much crystal moss in a 5-star dungeon, decides Humu must be at least a captain, asks to check on the boy and his assistant Yumin, and Quiso steps in to handle it himself. Turns out the boy talking to Park is actually Captain Lee Jed. A few days go by, and while training in the hellish place below, the hero fails at his 150th push-up and falls from the bar. Humu says that if he weren't stuck in hell, he'd be ready to do another 1,000, but even lifting just a little makes him exhausted. Lying on the ground, he wonders how long he's been there since he came back to hell. They tell him that his next mission is only 18 hours away. Hamu stared at the necklace and realized that after fiddling with it a few times, he finally got the hang of it, thinking that just like time in the underworld, the time left on his mission matches the minutes ticking away in the real world. Kong thinks the only issue is that he ends up in a completely new spot every single time he comes back from hell. He says he gets everything except this, which he thinks is way too complicated. Frustrated, Humu wonders why his spot keeps shifting. The boy hits the ground and keeps whispering that he doesn't get it. Once more, the system pops up to show how the battle helper boosts accuracy by watching and guiding the skill user's every move. Kong feels that in a game an assistant is just a cheat, but since he needs one to survive hell, using it isn't actually cheating. The battle skill just woke up inside him. As Hayamu throws punches during his training, he spots something odd in his surroundings. He says he slowly finds his aim getting tighter until he hits one spot. The boy swings at it again, but he feels so frustrated. Kong questions himself, wondering if they remembered every move he made, changed the plan, and exactly what his assistant means. He is totally blown away by what he's seeing. A fresh mission kicks off, and this time it's about being a friend to a beginner. Helmu wonders if beginner is the right word for him. While Kong insists he's already at level 7 and shouldn't get such an easy mission, he ponders the talk about scarecrows and insists he hasn't spotted any around here. Realizing he needs to get stronger, he finally gets moving. The boy trudges through the nightmare, wandering until he finally spots a set of stairs. Scared, Humu admits it feels like he's starring in a horror movie. Suddenly, a bunch of scarecrows pop up right in front of the young man, staring him down. Curious but confused about what those things are, he soon realizes they're just the beginner-level scarecrows. Humu tells them to give the scarecrows a cool makeover. Seeing that his foes have no levels, he figures they won't suddenly gain any experience. Not knowing who his opponents are, the young boy tosses the dart anyway, figuring he might as well try. He gets ready to toss the object. After tossing the ball, he ducks behind a wooden plank, but since the opponents don't move, the boy isn't sure if they are actually just scarecrows. The boy thinks the fight will be easy since the monsters aren't doing much, but Kong is shocked when he punches and feels like he missed completely, even though he used all his strength. Suddenly, the scarecrow's eyes glow red as they claim to have recognized their opponent and begin sparring. Frightened, Kong notices the rivals matching his skill, so he asks to talk about the monsters first, but he's grateful they aren't as fast as the goblins. Thoughtful Haimu realizes that reaching level 7 in the real world means you're treated like a seasoned bodyguard or soldier with at least 5 years of experience behind you. But down in hell, they treat him just like a rookie. Frustrated, he growls at the scarecrows and learns that a special battle helper has just turned on. In that situation, the hero would have to fight and defeat every single robot. He trembles with fear as he gets ready for the first strike. Suddenly, an opponent lunges for a punch, but Kong Haimu spots the move and slips away with ease. When he spots an opening, he strikes back and lands a hit on his foe. But he gets caught by a robot that tries to strangle him with a mechanical chokehold. He knocks his foe with a sharp elbow, yet the robot won't let him get away. With a swift twist, he hits the android right on the head. As the metal gets dented, you can see flaws starting to appear on its surface. Confused, Kong Haimu wonders if the attack worked, but right then the robot spots the opponent and starts a second-level spar. While he's distracted, his enemies creep closer to get to him. One of them grabs his hair with a powerful, sudden tug. Another target locks onto his arms, trapping the boy in place. His legs get hit too, freezing him in place so he can't move a single inch. In a panic, he begs the robots to let him go just as he sees his enemy coming closer. A punch slammed into his face with a sharp sting, leaving him in disbelief and scrambling to figure out how to fight back. Suddenly, he feels his muscles surge with power, while his body becomes tougher against bleeding and pain. The boy keeps getting hit by the androids, and it seems like the blows will never stop. Not long after his power faded below 10%, the title's special gift brought him back to life. Bruised and bleeding, he fights to heal. But he quickly realizes it's too late, for his body is worn out from all the fighting and he can't even hit back, so he starts to wonder if he should just run away. Even though he is weak and unsteady, he pushes himself up from the ground. Seeing the opponents rely on martial arts, he unleashed his energy, ready to use a powerful move to finally defeat them. Not long after, a glowing baton suddenly pops into his hand. That ugly piece of wood was packed with a fierce attack power, but it wasn't very tough and broke easily. Running forward, he was set to end the fight with his wooden baton. His eyes burn with fury and a fierce resolve to crush any foe. The robots stood ready for battle, waiting to strike against the danger. He slams his fist into the opponent with all his might. The outcome was that his arm was utterly ruined. Kong, who watches closely as the robot takes a hit and immediately starts copying its opponent's moves. Before anyone could react, a strange weapon suddenly popped out of the robot's body. The nervous protagonist was trapped in a tight spot. Not long after, every opponent raised a weapon and pointed it at one person, Kong Hyumu. After living for just 5 days, the hero finally falls. With no breath left in him but a fire to keep going, he squeezed his hands into tight fists and stepped up to fight, even though his body was screaming for rest. The android struck with such wild rage that the young man could barely dodge in time. He screamed with all his might and threw a hard, perfect punch. Tying the robots to the wall felt like a dirty trick, but with nowhere else to turn, he needed the help of the battle assistant to face his enemy one-on-one. All at once, he lets go and pours every drop of energy inside him out. The whole place changes instantly when the air fills with bright light. Our next move is to smash the enemy's heart. As he stepped closer, the robot finally knew exactly who he was. The warning flashed that level 3 sparring had just started, and he hammered the android with fierce blows. As the man in front of him got tougher, he got tougher too. Worn out, he looks like he's lost track of how many times this mission has failed. In the final round, he was struck from behind by the robot's precise kick to the head, which killed him just like before. Even a simple ring-style move ended his life. Over and over again, he died trying to complete the same mission. The young man was already furious at how the robot's endless martial arts tricks were tearing his body apart, especially since it never used the same move twice. Suddenly, his opponent planted both feet on the ground and waited for the fight to continue. So the two stared each other down with pure determination as they planned their next moves. Kong Hyumu was so sure he'd win his one-on-one battle that he never imagined dying. He leaps forward and throws a punch at the android, but it's easily blocked without any tricks, leaving him confused and standing right in front of his opponent. He plants one foot down to catch his balance. He kicks the robot right in the head. In that instant, the opponent knew exactly what was happening, and they began their 4th-level sparring match, leaving the protagonist thrilled to realize he had finally reached level for himself. But before he could celebrate, the robot's cold metal fingers snap shut on his eyes. Just as he opens his mouth to bite the boy, he lets out a scream of pure despair. His leg gets bitten hard, and it hurts so much. Kong, who stood frozen in terror, staring at the wreckage where his leg used to be after the robot tore it apart. In terrible pain, the young man compares all that metal to a dog before passing away once more. After trying 9 times, Kong Hyumu finally saw 3 truths. First, the fight stops at level 4, so the pattern stopped changing forever. As he fought the robots, sweat streaming down his face, he kept finding new ways to win and never gave up. Also, those scarecrows just dance in the same old loop over and over. If the quirk happens, it will freeze and stop correcting its path. By understanding the truth, he overcame some of them, driven by a fierce desire to win that kept him moving despite his exhaustion. In the end, they didn't need to be destroyed because once they took enough hits, they would just stop moving. By the time it was all over, they didn't have to be destroyed. Once Hyumu figured out those 3 things, the results he got were huge. Soon after, he managed to spar several times, gaining new skills and fighting power with every match. The hero was set to learn everything he could. Even though he didn't have to, he ended up wrecking one of the scarecrows. As he threw down the last of his foes to finally end the brawl, the warning flashed up again, signaling that his sparring time was over. And just a little while later, the beginner's friend mission was finally done. Kong Hyumu's face looked tired but happy that he had made it there. Every scarecrow lay flat on the ground, trapped and unable to stand again. Watching that scene gave him a real sense of satisfaction. But he was so tired he dropped to the ground to catch his breath. The protagonist refused to face enemies equal to himself, so he didn't even bother caring about the mission's name. To him, the boy was already as skilled as a master, with their fighting moves being pressed straight into him like they were second nature. He shifted his attention to the rewards he'd earned. The legendary SSS rank title Good Luck makes your rewards even better. Confused and knowing nothing about it, he finds a wrapping cloth already in his hands. That legendary celestial cradle, a magical cloth that speeds up growth and heals any injury, left the young man both thrilled and confused since he had no clue how to use it. He began to think that wrapping a cloth around his head might actually make him smarter. Feeling foolish with no one watching, he tosses the useless cloth aside since the boy was already healed, and decides to sell the legendary item just to keep the cash. Peering into the system, he spots the egg he picked up while taking apart the mosquitoes. Thinking about how the cloth has grown, he wonders if it might work with that other item. Kong Hyunu thinks his new idea isn't working on the egg and plans to sell the useless stuff, but then the egg suddenly starts changing completely. Debris flying through the air made the young man feel suspicious. The eggshell cracks open quietly, yet Kong Hyunu worries that a hungry monster might be hatching inside. As the fear inside him grows until he is about to give up, the egg keeps cracking open a little more with every passing moment. Then, a bright flash of light suddenly hits the hero right in the face. The force is so strong it smashes the egg into 1,000 shards, and from the broken shell emerges a tiny, strange creature. A cute little fairy was resting soundly in a deep sleep. The hero was totally caught off guard by that confusion. A few moments later, her eyes fluttered open, bringing the tiny fairy to life right as the egg finally hatched. Confused, the protagonist begins to study the strange creature standing right in front of him. He nudges her with his finger, insisting the fairy is much smaller than he expected. But the creature moves faster than he can react and snaps his finger with its tiny teeth. In that split second, the hero finally sees the truth. It's a monster that eats people. To him, the prize meant nothing, while the fair's hungry cries echoed around him. She looked down with a heavy heart, sighing because her belly was growling from hunger. As he watched that scene, the hero realized he had to jump in and help her. He pulls a candy from his pocket and offers it to the fairy, who turns it down instantly. Then the creature points at the confused protagonist. It seemed the fairy was very interested in him. Finally, it turned out to be a cannibal monster just trying to find a way to satisfy its hunger. He gives a little of his blood. Once the fairy had her fill, she would stop the bleeding. For the boy, the whole scene was gross, but since he got the egg by showing off the mosquitoes, he couldn't complain, especially since that fairy looked just like a mosquito, maybe even a mosquito fairy. Happy, the creature says the meal was great but is now very hungry for dessert. Kong Hyunu was so annoyed he couldn't believe how bold that monster was. She takes back what she just said and thanks her butler for the meal. He lets go of the small child and asks her what her name is. But the fairy pushes her fading memory to its very limit. Then, she feels a cold shock as she suddenly cannot remember her own name. Even so, she knew she wasn't a mosquito fairy and firmly denied it. Soon after, she finally remembers her own name. She was the fairy meant to show up at the very end of time and eat every living thing when the world finally ended. Confused, the protagonist can't make sense of the dark plans hiding behind such a fragile being. In that split second, he struggled to decide whether to strike down the fairy, who looked embarrassed and admitted she only promised to eat everything once the world was already gone. As she watches, the protagonist isn't convinced she could finish it all. He realizes his blood is so poisonous it could melt a goblin's hands. Even after drinking his blood, the creature looked just fine. When he touched her, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of power she held and how strong she really was. After a while, he figured he could just tame her and keep her like a pet to get rid of her. Confused, he tries to figure out what that creature really wants. From that day forward, he called her Renian, and she loved hearing her new name. In the fairy tongue, the words seemed like a spooky messenger of doom. He was stunned by what he heard, so in the end, he begged her to make just one promise. He insists she never eat a human, and if she's about to starve, she must eat someone other than him. In return, he was willing to share a bit more of his blood. As the fairy enjoys her new feast, he secretly wishes her diet was a little more out of balance. The two of them notice something beside them, a scene as glorious as a battlefield won by victors. After a moment of thought, the young man watches the scene with great attention. He sees that one of them is torn in half, which brings on strange fears and worry, and he can't believe he could have done something so brutally cruel. As the system swings open to reveal a startling yet fascinating message, the brave energy joins the battle assistant, and he lifts a robot while pondering this new trait. He balanced it out, then dropped all his worrying to jump straight into action without a second thought. He quickly made up his mind to try out his new power, feeling more confident than ever. He throws a hard punch at the dummy, and the shaking power travels through his arm. I was amazed by how big my power really was, and it was clear it couldn't be ignored. Even Rainian couldn't believe the power I showed. She sets her sights on the robot and starts beating it with all her might. Right then, a warning shouts that they need to identify their enemy. Suddenly, every robot lying on the ground starts to stand up again. With battle ready, the hero takes his spot. One step at a time, they began walking toward him, for he was a superhuman and the lock had finally turned off. Confused by what was going on, he just watched everything around him. He never truly grasped what it meant to be superhuman. He pointed to his left and showed him something. The young man starts taking the junk out one piece at a time. Rainian catches a scent so delicious and mysterious that it completely captivates her. Curious and focused, she pointed toward where the scent was leading. He slides the table aside and discovers a human skeleton hidden behind it. The fairy found the scent delightful. She picked up the bones and started gnawing on them while screaming, even though her boss had told her not to eat dead people. She notices her hand holding a letter, signaling that someone is there. When she opened it, she began reading every single word inside. The story said that 3 years had gone by since the nightmare level, and the children born during the toxic times had passed away. Even those with powers couldn't hold back the force and started to fall one by one. Hope fades and humanity drifts toward extinction, but the hero laughs off the warning as if it's nonsense. Based on the letter and the message he found upon entering, it was all about the world's future he had witnessed. The letter told us that Father Johann and Professor Park Hyos had died, but since it had no signature, he had no idea who had written it. When she found the return stone, the fairy asked if she could eat. The hero starts to think about what the skeleton could be used for. He tells Renee to give him that thing. As soon as his hand touched the stone, a soft glow started to light up the whole room. In a panic, they had no idea what was going on around them. His hand was glued to the cold stone and wouldn't budge. The young man couldn't let go, so he stood there with his hand stuck until the stone broke apart, and then the boy felt a sharp pain. He stared at the palm of his hand and saw something that made his blood run cold. For some reason, the stone's design had somehow moved onto his skin. A warning flashed before him, revealing that the stars were watching his every move. Suddenly, everything starts to shift as Run and says goodbye to her friend, the butler, and leaves him with a plea to survive and come back on his own. As he is pulled by something unseen, his panic grows deeper. Suddenly, he wakes up with the entire universe spinning all around him. Lost in a sea of stars, he wanders through space trying to find a fairy, while completely confused by what's happening around him. Another warning revealed that the powerful star Beryl had seen the star fragment being absorbed. Beryl felt let down by the very causes he had stood up for until now. So he grabbed the broken piece, chose to run away looking for answers, and now terrified, he starts making jokes about maybe dying. He couldn't believe that even a famous star felt let down by him. Then, a sudden warning flashes that the lock is already gone. The stars belong to powerful beings who rule their own corner of space and split their great power into pieces to share with others. They do this hoping their family will gain this power, become rulers, and grow their lands. Kong Humu holds one of those pieces. So, they really want to catch a glimpse of one of their own kind. His eyes go wide as the pieces suddenly click into place. Runyan didn't find a stone to bring him back, but a tiny piece of a broken star instead. A strange sound made him snap to attention and scan his surroundings. He lifts his eyes and spots something glowing with a fierce, blinding light. As the colors weave together, they all drift closer to the main character. The star whispers that the monster is looking for a charm to trick everyone, while the winning star Arden offers command over an army of fire and steel, and the hungry star Yogo Lamb tells him to follow in the hunt for the snake that ate the last world. The brittle star Galas opens a hidden world for him to rule, while the green star warns that he will soon command every past thing, and those waiting to back him have already seen his power. So he had to pick a star to move forward. Furious, he insists you must learn a bit about the stars before making your choice. The brittle star Galas is a hidden master who laughs at his own dark scheme, while the green lamenting star is the source of all sorrow, leading an army of the dead to spread despair. The hungry star Yogulame is a greedy snake of desire that wants to swallow everything in this world. The whispering star Monstral tricks everyone in the dark while bringing light to the world, and no powerful being can escape its deception. The conquering star Arden is a loser who pushes forward with fire, kills his enemies with steel, and burns the world with hatred. Seeing that they all looked alike, he joked that they must all have a personality disorder. The system says that stars are most drawn to those just like them. The boy couldn't believe he looked like those strange creatures, thinking he was neither a traitorous, attention-seeking monster nor a greedy, broken soul. Enraged, he feels he didn't just fall from hell as a bad guy, but rather that he is just as worthless as trash. Knowing he wasn't a good man, he claimed he hadn't weighed anyone down. Maybe the hero failed because he didn't know enough, yet he still felt better than those other guys, so he wondered what would happen if he picked one of the stars. As the brittle star gently opens near him to reveal the future, the protagonist is stunned by the star's power and must now pick one to follow. So worn down by his pain, he didn't trust anyone and wasn't sure if anything good would come his way without a heavy price to pay. And the answer to his question was to serve and follow that being, for the stars support their kin who act as their representatives, and choosing a star is a rare chance. As he accepted their praise and kept winning, the boy started growing taller and stronger every day. He took his time to pick one, but the stars seemed angry at his boldness. Thinking to himself, he wondered if he should have been more careful with his words, knowing that power is good but not without a cost, even as those stars appeared for some reason. He saw them for the first time that day, and they were already pushing him to pick a life-changing path without even having anyone to trust. Once Arden, the conquering star, lost interest, the protagonist didn't mind at all and said he could leave. Eventually, the stars promised him all the time he needed to think. Feeling grateful, he thanks them for worrying about him. Suddenly, the young man came back to where he started, looking completely confused. But right beside him, a star glows so fiercely that it fills the air with mystery, and as the boy feels a strange shock from Monstral that makes him cry out in pain, his heart begins to race with fear. Finally, she walks away with the rest of them. The system reveals that the Whispering Star Monstral has awakened a hidden power, granting the legendary domination ability. Reading that made the boy realize the offer was huge, and he found it strange that beings who could give out legendary powers couldn't stop the infernal difficulty, meaning far more people should have woken up. Kong Hyanmu thinks about his scale, a power that no one with abilities can stop. Staring at his hand, he realizes that those same stars could have forged a hell. Driven by resolve, he set out to learn everything he could about those strange beings. When he opened his eyes, he realized 3 days had gone by. In hell, might makes right, but in the real world, there are far more problems than just how strong you are. For instance, knowing exactly where you need to return and dodging the awkward stares of strangers as you head home. Our hero sat at home, daydreaming about owning his own place. Min is baffled by Ham's sudden mood change and demands to know why he wants a fortress-like house with a medical wing to wash away his sins, only to be told the truth. Such homes once existed, but they were never for just anyone like him. He is stunned by her words but feels better when she tells him she didn't mean to say he can't buy one if he really wants to. A little later, she thought she was right, but first he needed to find a house, though he worried people would stare if he bought one so suddenly. Right now, he needs to save up his money, get stronger, and work his way up the rankings. He stares up at the stars, wondering why he can only choose just one to keep. They all look like they could carry the weight of the world. So what made it necessary to pick just one? He grabs every single offer they give him, even if it means the whole world is coming to an end. In the end, if he proves strong enough, he'll stand tall with the whole world beneath his feet. Our boy was lost in his own world until Min yelled at him to snap out of it and start eating. They turn on the TV and watch the news about the Baked Dew Dungeon. Reports say the backdoor barrier might finally bring lasting peace to the Korean peninsula, sparking talk among onlookers about old collapses and how little attention such moments get these days. Our hero wonders what kind of disaster this was, and he calls it a flood. We are given an explanation. A flood happens when monsters from a dungeon break free, including the powerful 5-star ones. To stand a chance against them, you need weapons charged with magic, because stepping into that place without them is just a desperate gamble. If Gay Lee and her team pull this off, they might just unlock something amazing. After all, every clan agrees that taking down the north is impossible, so our hero asks if they actually did it, since he can't remember. While the news keeps playing, our boy chows down on instant noodles, knowing that a 3-day talent test is coming up. Since the test will gather a huge group of talented people for baked, our boy turns off the TV to focus, which clearly annoys Min. Really, she was just mad that he kept pausing his meal to talk, which made him feel embarrassed and start apologizing. While our hero fumes at the crowded test registration area, a loud argument with a stranger in the background only makes the scene more chaotic. He even turns back, furious, screaming at the guy bothering him. The man quickly came up with a story, claiming he never spoke to him at all because he was talking to someone else instead. The stranger keeps pressing to see if this is the boy's first time, but the boy just sits there, quiet and lost in thought. Our hero begins to recall his childhood, and he remembers being marked as different at the orphanage, the only one ever to be singled out. Our boy nods and tells the man, "Yes, this was my first time." But the man just chuckles, saying he could tell from a mile away that he's a total beginner. But he adds that since the evaluators let everyone walk right up without checking who's new or old, the line is nothing but chaos, and Hun asks if all the hunters are just thrown together, which the random guy confirms is exactly what happens when the clan is opening up for recruits. The boy asked if he was there for the same reason, but the man shook his head, saying he only wanted to renew his registration so that, once his old level was updated, he could start charging more for his services. Our hero thinks that even though people are sorted by their power levels and weapons can't beat someone who wields them, it's no surprise that people get too fixated on it. It's so simple to steer people with this trick that if he did anything strange, he'd get caught, which means he'll finish the race so fast that nobody will even notice. At the very beginning, we'll take a look at how everything works. We face 3 kinds of tests, one to check who you are, one to see where you stand, and one to measure what you can do. The registrar squints at the hero's ID, looking a bit puzzled. All of this is a massive bureaucracy where failing the first stage could become a huge problem. A blood sample taken for the status test will be sent to a lab, but the real challenge comes next when you have to pass the skills test. This test is nothing but a fight to see who has the skills to win. As we watch Random cheer over his 140-point score, we are finally introduced to this new system. Most men sit near a mark of 100, though some float higher while others drift lower. Even with all that, a high score means nothing because most people don't really care about numbers. Our boy starts to think about it as his turn gets closer. First, he puts his hand on the device and holds the sphere inside it. He keeps looking for the right sphere until he finds one hidden deep inside. He squeezes it until something snaps with a loud bang. The scientists stare in shock while the boy freezes in fear, leaving everyone to awkwardly exchange confused glances with nothing making sense. Hun yanks his arm free from the machine, jolted by the sudden noise. As the scientist stares at the strange numbers in disbelief, the evaluators can't fathom how a simple skill measuring machine could break, so they decide it must be faulty. Meanwhile, the boy frets over his mistake, but the evaluator reassures him that this happens all the time and tells him to just try again. As they start fixing the machine, the protagonist wonders if he should hold back his own strength. This time, he decides to hold back his strength so he won't break the machine, while confused evaluators beep and talk about testing it again until he finally passes and the result is marked as pending. After that, the team split up with the strong defenders on one side and the powerful attackers on the other. If you're feeling a little lost or have a special power, head all the way to the far left. Hyena hears these instructions and feels confused, not sure if he needs to give a yes or no while he waits for his own evaluation. He remembers that he got there because the staff thought his friends were just being lazy, and now she's asking if his skills are too hard to measure. Our boy admits he's not sure but suspects it was true, and since we saw him change the machine during the test, the interviewer says she'll pass him but hand him a pamphlet to guide him. She explains that this new test, guided by Clan Taein, is different from before, and while she tries not to sound like a nagger, there's a real chance the boy could get hurt or even worse. If he's still worried about cash even though the job pays well, maybe he should look for something else. Hen insists he isn't doing this for cash, so the interviewer presses him to say what he's doing it for instead. She questions about power, status, or a twisted sense of justice. The protagonist says that while no one can say for sure, there is one thing that is absolutely true. She let him go with a warning that the dungeon is far harder to rule than our world, then told him the envelope holds an emergency number and explained what the test will be. She tells him that reading the envelope might save him, and she warns that today's test takes place inside a dungeon. Our boy chuckles with friendly curiosity, eager to peek inside a mysterious dungeon. Outside, we spot corporate cars and 2 tall, strong men in suits. Then a shiny car pulls up and someone opens its door. Someone very important is about to step out. Sure enough, out steps Jite Lee, a super handsome man who immediately draws a crowd of fans as he exits the car. The formal man asks his employee if everything is ready, gets a yes, mentions that the red butterfly is there, explains about the other clans, and says there is nothing to worry about. Jed says his aim isn't to join the Taong clan, but to lead the northern expedition, noting that only those with real talent and skill have refused clan offers until now. Though they happily agreed to join the northward journey and instantly accepted the chance to keep the butterfly, Lee chuckled at the whole thing. Finally, he asks about the new arrivals while his employee grins, saying everyone is weak except for one very strange guy, then points to the protagonist's goofy photo. He jokes about the boy's poisonous blood, and that remark catches the blondie's attention. He holds up the boy's test results, showing that his poison levels are way too high. Lee thinks this is interesting, but worries that the blood from this power might hurt his teammates during a big fight. Finally, he says they must keep watching the boy no matter what, and then we find ourselves in a place called Gate B. Inside, we can see several participants. A tall one, a blonde with slicked back hair, a redhead, and a 4-eyed one. Finally, our hero Hugh enters the room, where an employee catches his eye, hands him something confusing, and walks away, leaving Hugh feeling angry and asking what was going on. He asks the worker one last time what the thing is, but the worker bolts to get away from his questions. The main character stares in total shock, completely lost, while everyone else around him acts like he's invisible. A voice from behind called for everyone to come inside, and they all obeyed. As we walk into the evaluation room for the third test of the Yangen Skills Gym, a voice keeps talking about the new players and tells us this fake 2-star dungeon is just a copy of a real one from Eastern Europe. The player must grab as many cards as they can before the game ends. For the next 3 hours, we'll dive straight into a real dungeon adventure. Everyone gets just 1 piece, but the monsters get 3, and whoever finds the most pieces wins the reward. The nerdy one explains that humans are just another target for monsters in that situation and asks if Humu wants to join them. He answers the call with only a lazy ear scratch, acting like he doesn't care at all. He ends his reply with a simple no. But while the others look surprised, he draws a circle of lights around himself, flashes a cheeky grin, and insists he's really not going to do it. The guy in glasses tries to argue that their group has more members and better defenses, but the protagonist shuts him down by saying that since only the top team wins, having a group just means sharing the prize with no one else having a reason to say no. But the biggest one didn't stop there. He grabbed the smallest by his clothes and yanked him while shouting that if Hunu was going to get robbed, he should at least hand over his piece. Our boy glanced back, smiled, and said, "If that's what you want, then fine, you were right." In a flash, he drops below the tallest man and lands a sharp side punch right on his face, knocking him flying. He casually snatched the item from the person in front of him, grinned with a wicked look, claimed he'd forgotten to grab the pieces from those amateurs, and then threatened to make someone else hand over their stuff next. The small guy with glasses tosses his hands up to surrender without a second thought, only for the protagonist to ask if the boy truly thinks he can just turn around and walk away after giving up. The smallest one just tosses his piece right down on the ground in front of the biggest one. Our boy asks if the four-eyed one needs that item more than he does, but since there's no proof of that, he concludes that the knocked-out guy is the only one with real defensive skills and no one else could stop him. Meanwhile, Kong just shrugs and says he doesn't care as long as he has the pass. In a different, more orderly place, a man in white watched the boy and praised the red butterfly's amazing talent, noting how she'd already stolen many cards, and that she was strong enough to enter the dangerous 3-star dungeons. The other guy beside him called it amazing but added that the girl could get much stronger with the right help, and since only the most talented could survive this endurance test, there was no need to keep an eye on her right now. We can see the girl standing face to face with a giant being covered in heavy armor. The man explains that even the bravest heroes will struggle when facing the unique android monster from D&W Industries, which is built using parts from mushroom creatures found in the Sea Noble dungeon. Officially called the Mushroom Droid, this weirdly named machine is actually a top-tier fighter that packs serious combat skills, tough armor, extra mana, and even self-repairing powers thanks to its special mushrooms. We can hear the man explaining that while the weaker robots struggle against the punching test participants who send them flying, they still have a chance to survive if they stick together in a group. The real trouble starts for anyone fighting by themselves, just like the red butterfly. She knew taking on that single card alone would be tough, especially since it was so deep and hard to pull out. Although the monsters aren't the only danger because other players might try to kill her. He keeps talking until something grabs his attention and he suddenly orders his friend to be quiet. He pointed out a big red dot on the map and warned that something exciting was about to happen. The robot stares hard at the furious protagonist, who suddenly bursts out laughing at the thought of a real monster before leaping forward to punch the approaching humanoid in the face with such force that it crumples while screaming that the beast can't even talk back. The mushroom fighter struggles to stay grounded against the blow, but Hunamu lands another punch right on the chin, mocking the robot's simple movements while delivering a precise hook. As the monster stumbles, the fighter grabs its leg, hurls it high into the air, and mocks its weak skills, while the boy grits his teeth, gasps for air in rage, and shouts to the sky that this isn't fun, all while surrounded by proof of the many monsters he has already defeated. He didn't just defeat them. He utterly destroyed them, dismantling one to rip out the card he wanted from its inside, only to call it too easy when he hadn't expected such a simple victory. He stared at the card in his hand, wondering how things could have gone so smoothly while fuming at the mess he was in. While the event narrator shouts that 34 minutes have gone by and over 30% of the points are already gathered, it's time to reveal the ranks. Coming in third with 7 points was Karma. Taking second spot with 9 points was the red butterfly. First up, Humakang took the lead with a strong 16 points. Our boy starts bragging, saying he'd rather fight goblins than these weak puppets. Anyway, he'll check the items now and is shocked to see they are just normal spores shaped like meat. He finds it strange that they treat this monster item, thinking maybe its scarecrow material is why it's so tough. As the leather on his arm begins to gleam and shift, he wonders if he can use it, and then a brilliant light erupts from his arm as he unlocks his crafting power. With this, he crafted leather guards for his arms and legs. Feeling pumped up about his new gear, he wastes no time and sets off to get the rest of them. The butterfly girl stares at the score, wondering why she can't beat that boy, just as other competitors rush past her in the background to ambush her and blast her with a sudden storm of spells. She leaps so high she leaves the ground behind and flies through the air, darting along walls and dodging every blow like she's dancing with her attackers, even spinning mid-jump to escape a flurry of strikes that try to surround her. The blasts erupted in mid-air trying to hit the woman in the center, but she had already dropped to the ground and dodged them with ease. She hits the ground and stares hard at her enemies. Immediately after landing among the fighters she had just bested, more than a few onlookers watched her in stunned silence, unable to believe how she managed those moves. The butterfly strikes a fighting stance, ready to face whoever comes next. But before anything else, we watch as fighters are launched into the air, one by one, while someone shouts their names. It was Carmason, worried about the butterfly, who warned that pushing so hard might hurt it. The redhead tries to argue about her second-place ranking, but her companion says it doesn't matter since they already have enough points to go north on their expedition. So he asks the rest of them if she's right. He confirms they found all 88 pieces together, but the butterfly felt it wasn't enough and drifted away, leaving Carmason to ask where she was going. As a goodbye, the butterfly says she'll leave on her own terms and dashes away, leaving her friend trying and failing to stop her as they both watch their ally disappear into the background. Inside the evaluation booth, the judges stare in confusion, trying to figure out who Kong really is. The recruiter says the boy's skills need to be checked, and the man in white confirms that this is indeed the boy with the poisonous blood. As they kept asking, they wondered if the man in the dungeon was the same one before, and the answer was yes. He wonders if that daring man who sneaks into dungeons without permission is one of the skilled rogues, only to have his companion clarify that while they might be criminals, the boy himself has never broken the law. Then the blonde noted that the rules were looser in the other sea, so this was definitely a real option. He ended his thinking with a huge, satisfied grin. Back at the test, our hero shakes one of the monster items, eager to watch the others start fighting. As the red butterfly flits frantically around looking for something, our boy takes a bite of that strange monster meat, and the system just shrugs it off as totally normal. But shortly after, he vomits everything, claiming the food tastes awful and won't be easy to eat even though he's starving, shattering the cheerful mood as Hun senses a terrible feeling that something is racing toward him. As he looks back, believing the threat must be a skilled archer, a butterfly suddenly explodes toward him, forcing him to dodge at the last second. Her face was hard with anger as she finished getting ready for the fight and asked the person in front of her if they were alone. With a sneer, our hero claims he has 150 men guarding the spot while asking the woman why she keeps questioning him. She watches him in quiet silence before telling him that he is the only one here. With a war cry, she challenges him to battle, daring him to prove his worth, while we see that he is still only half her level. But that's all he can think about right before she throws a straight punch at him. He can't believe she's so tough for blocking his punch with her arms, and before he can do anything, she's already kicking him with a front kick, so he has to dodge that heavy blow while realizing that one well-placed hit from her could send him straight to the afterlife. Even though the butterfly missed the boy's kick, she quickly swoops back to strike him with the bottom of her foot. He sidesteps her kick once more, letting it slam into the floor and crack it open. How even starts to giggle nervously, realizing he's in deep trouble if he isn't going to have a battle helper. Just as he bends backward to dodge, another kick flies straight past him. Knowing he has one makes it easier for him to dodge the hits and slip away from harm. Before he can even finish speaking, the woman is already winding up to kick him. These two moves slip past the hero, who concludes there's no space left to launch a counterattack. He starts to feel exhausted as he tries to pull away from the butterfly, muttering that he can't stand this mess. Kim realizes that while his power would be too dangerous for humans, it's safe against someone this strong, and he knows he can't keep fighting while trying to counter the butterfly. As the redhead charges head-on at breakneck speed, one of his fists begins to glow with a bluish light, setting the stage for a massive clash of red and blue energy that fills the entire arena while the fierce battle between the red butterfly and Kong Hamu rages on, their eyes burning with the fury coursing through their bodies. As the opposing forces clash and light floods the room, they push to end the fight fast, but right as she throws a punch, the red butterfly spots something odd. Then she gets hit in both her arm and leg at the same time, and the pain knocks her down to the ground. Exhausted, Kong Hu gasps for air and orders the woman to give him her pieces. She didn't believe she had lost, so she tossed the bag down. Curious, she wonders what power he has, but before she can speak, a strange sound rushes closer. She turns and feels her nerves jump when she sees how close he is, and then he strikes with all his strength. His body flips and rolls across the ground in a dizzying series of somersaults. Before he could make sense of what was going on, fear took hold of him. He spots the same troublemakers from before and knows they are here to cause trouble for him. The man calls himself the Red Snake, but Hungarian growls at the wounds on her friend's body before forcing herself to stay calm, since the enemy is so strong. Kneeling down, Kong Humu admits he is the one who broke the red butterfly's heart. As he spoke, the announcer told everyone that after 3 long hours, the game was finally over. When they said they'd announce the rankings, the hero's stomach turned with worry that they wouldn't take first place. Ha Yum Tek took 3rd place with a score of 21. Kong Hai Mu is stunned to find out he only took 2nd place with 69 pieces. The red butterfly, made of 88 tiny pieces, stood tall as the grand champion. Hungarian wasn't even shocked when her friend won. The red butterfly feels a bit lost at first, but then she sees she has plenty of pieces right there to fix things. Kong Hyun Imo realizes she took extra pieces while he was distracted, but she insists it's just a mistake. Feeling the sharp pain in his back, he quickly changes the topic and makes a beeline for the door. Hungarian won't let the boy walk away until he apologizes for hurting Annie's arm. Even though he couldn't afford to be seen, he still wouldn't say sorry. As he thought about everything, he saw his teammate rushing over worried that his arm was broken because she thought he was stealing the red butterfly's pieces. But in the end, he had played fair and won even after someone stole his 1st place spot. Even though he was a good man, he decided to teach them all a lesson. He whispers a single word that turns his enemy into his slave. Hungarian screamed from the other side, desperate to catch the boy's attention at any cost. But her face shifts as she spots something odd happening inside herself. The worried red butterfly jumps up and asks what happened to her teammate. The hero stays silent while the magic spreads all around them. Then, the huge monsters hidden behind him finally show themselves. Feeling hungry and collapsing to the ground in despair, those fears grow even stronger. Right beside the woman, a scary figure steps up to speak to her. Only she could see those scary creatures, which is why she was so scared. While the rest of the team comes together to help their terrified friend. A team of doctors and paramedics sprint toward the scene. Kong Humu suddenly understood that the mess he made was far worse than he had ever guessed. Before things could get worse, he slips away while the men watch him talk about the red butterfly. The light-haired man believed that this precise move was just a misunderstanding. Seeing a skilled user who wasn't even level 10, he realized the hunters could be beaten soon. So he nervously asked the captain if they should meet the red butterfly. Before anything else, he needed to have a chat with Manhwa. In the meantime, the young man looked exhausted and pressed a cold can against his side to soothe the ache. Even though he fought with courage and held his ground, the battle drained his magic power away. In that very instant, he wished he'd never used that power, feeling like he'd just thrown away all his mana. Suddenly, a strange figure shouts out to the boy. Tamensu, the head of the Tong clan team, hands over his card and tells the young man that the clan is ready to support him in mastering his skills. They made sure Kong Hanmu would unlock his true power as a hunter. Confused, the protagonist studies the business card very closely to make sense of it. He whispers words the man can't understand, then with curious eyes, asks if they can help him reach the stars, while the captain sits quietly in the back of his car. He stared intently at the laptop screen, watching the fight between the red butterfly and Kong Humo over and over again. A smile spreads across his face as he studies every single hit. For him, it felt like he was sitting back and watching a movie. With a quick tap on the glass, he sees his subordinate return, apologizing for being turned down by the young man. He told the captain that the boy didn't care about the deal, but the captain had already guessed that, and now the hero is speaking about the stars. Right then, the man figured it might just be a new slang word the young folks are using. Curious, he wondered if the leader understood what the word meant, but it was the very first time he'd ever heard it. But the red butterfly said yes to the offer, because all she wanted was to fly north with the expedition. The captain thanked him for the news and said he was heading home. Tae-minsu waves goodbye to his boss and tells him to be careful on the way home. Inside the car, the man in the white suit stared at the strange reaction, realized he couldn't make sense of it, and knew he had to keep his eyes locked on Kong Hyamu. At the same time, a curious woman sat beside the young man in the car, eager to see what he was holding. The hero explained that a reporter had sent him a card from talent recruiters after his test, but the woman was still curious about the big box resting on his lap. As he opened the box, he started trying to explain what it was all about. Uni begged for forgiveness, pleading that Hungarian was truly trying their best. In that very moment, he recalled the mighty woman from earlier, who had been in terrible fear and needed her teammates to come to his aid. The young man looks back over everything that happened and tells the red butterfly to let it all go. He claims the award as his own before handing over the prize for first place. So the young man had no choice but to take that item. Inside the box lay 2 tough gloves that made your hands stronger and helped you take hits better. The blonde woman told him right beside him that she sold the crystal to Parkiso, who was truly eager to get his hands on it. Confused, The protagonist wonders if someone is pulling strings behind the scenes to make them need the crystal moss so badly, which means he should skip the middleman Parko and talk directly to that suspicious old man who isn't an easy target. The girl keeps talking, wondering if those gloves were the only reward for taking the test. Digging through the box, he thinks about the money, and then a piece of paper falls right into his lap. Reaching over to the woman next to him, he eagerly holds out his hand and asks if she'd like to eat some of the meat from their new prize. The whole prize was a staggering $50 million. Soon after, she parks in his spot, and when they get home, the two talk about how the association seemed to respect hunters much more, but she worries the young man isn't being careful enough while he just shrugs it off. Suddenly, he starts sniffing at a strange smell. As the person pushes the elevator button, Kang Hyumu realizes it is blood and the smell grows stronger, so he quickly tells the girl not to go inside and to rush back to the car. Kang Hyumu told her to stay locked inside the car and wait for him to come back. He walks, following the scent that pulls him along. Suddenly, he stumbled into the back of the building and saw a scary sight. A shadowy figure was knocking out men with powerful hits. Old Pariso C seemed really happy to see the main character again after so long. He tells the story of how the Yakuza were hunting down a strange crystal moss. Although the old man arrived too late to save Yu-min from danger, his secret plan to ally Kang Hyun-mu with Tong failed because the hero had already turned down the clan's offer. The old man dug deep for clues on Kang Hyun-mu but came up empty-handed. It felt like someone had wiped all traces of him from the world. Besides, he heard that the boy moved like a veteran dungeon fighter, and noticing the young man's thanks to Parko, the boy knew he was appreciated. He still insisted that the man was getting it wrong because he did not want to join any groups. In that split second, his face shifted entirely. He suddenly realized he had picked the wrong way to fix the problem. Feeling nervous, the protagonist senses things are changing, shouts for the old man to listen just a bit longer, and then gets hit by a powerful blow. Even though everyone is begging him to stop, Parkiso swings his fist at the young man without listening to a single warning. Kang Hyun-mu barely manages to slip away from the strike. With his hand in his pocket, he reaches out to stop the old man and make sure the man hears what he's saying. He hits the man's face with his gloves, knocking the surprised old man back with a powerful strike that Park Waiso knows is the first-place trophy from the Red Butterfly. With a fierce look in his eyes, the warrior insisted he only fought back to protect himself while the two men lay on the ground, speaking to each other face to face. Kang Hyun-mu faces an old man who thinks the boy is the one who always makes the toughest choices. His face twisted with rage, he pulled off his overcoat. Right then, he realized the boy wasn't going to listen to what he had to say. So he had no choice but to be rude and fight the young man with all his might. He quickly throws his suit over the hero's eyes to blind them. But the boy was so skilled he had already seen everything, and just as Parko twisted his cane into a sword to end the fight by any means necessary, Kang Hyu screamed out to use a special battle helper skill. The man ignores everything and lunges forward with his weapon ready. As the young man parried the heavy hits with barely enough time to slip away. A moment later, he plants his hands on the ground to push himself up, refusing to stop until he builds up speed and jumps high. Kang Hu swoops past the puzzled old man. Suddenly, he lands on the other side before his opponent even notices the move. Feeling happy, the young man knows he has finally reached his goal of catching up. But his joy doesn't last long because he suddenly sees a punch heading straight for him. Even though it's hard, he manages to slip away and moves toward the enemy. With a fierce look in his eyes, he casts a powerful spell to protect himself. Park Waiso spots his enemy's trick, and as the distracted man gets held in place by Kang Hyumu with his eyes rolling back in desperation, the hero stays focused on ending it all. But the young man paused for a second, noticing something strange, as Parkiso broke out of his trance and pressed his weapon right up against the boy's face. He feels a strange sensation, realizes a spell is working, and then a deep wound slashes the warrior. The sweat glistening on his face shows just how much his body hurts. That grumpy old man never meant to kill Kang Hyumu, which is why he sliced his wrist instead of his neck. In that instant, his only aim was to get answers from the man giving orders, and when he heard nothing but strange giggles from the young man, he realized he had no clue what was going on. His face showed how annoyed he was, wondering if the old man had forgotten something. Park Quiso stood confused, unable to make sense of the strange words floating before him. But he notices smoke rising from his sword, which is clearly being eaten away by rust. As he watched his instrument, he wondered if the blood inside might be poisonous. Reaching out with one hand, he moves closer to the face of the distracted old man. With gloved hands, he shoves the man until he crashes into a heavy wall. At that very moment, Park Wisto had already dropped his sword and was struggling to survive the crushing blow, knowing his years of experience couldn't protect him from the deadly poison. With a grin, The young guy knew he'd just taken the game in his own hands. But his rival was a master fighter who was already getting ready to strike back. He uses his elbow to strike the protagonist's arm, causing the protagonist to scream in pain, realize the blow was strong, and lose some of his strength. In a flash, Parkiso kicks his foe right in the gut and sends him flying. Face to face, each warrior bears the scars of battle in their body, while the old man digs through his vest for something precious. A tiny glass bottle sits there, holding a strange and unknown liquid inside. He didn't waste a second, dumping it all over his face as Kong Hamu laughed and called it the finest medicine in the world. As he stood up, he asked if there was any more to share with him. Confused, Parqueo was certain he had broken the young man's arm and ribs. Yet the boy stood perfectly fine, and Parqueo thought the boy might be healing, but Parqueo just wanted to keep fighting. Parkiso keeps his weapon tucked tight against his body, staring at it with intense focus. But he says the fight is finally over. As he stood up, he said he only wanted to make a deal with the boy, not fight him. When things got tougher than he thought, he started wondering who was really behind Kong Hanmu's moves. With grit in his teeth, the boy declared he stood all by himself with no one pulling his strings. Even though Parkiso tried to convince him to join Taeyong, the young man had absolutely no interest in working for anyone. Even as strange ideas floated through his head, they finally grabbed the old man's full attention. He grinned and said that if Parkiso chose to work for him, anything could change. The man with the mustache saw the silly words spilling out of that rotten boy's mouth. If he kept chasing those wild ideas, he'd leave right away. But Kong Haimu needed him there for his powerful connections and his amazing skill at handling secrets. Knowing he couldn't waste this moment, the hero pushed forward with all his might. As the old man turned his back, he started talking about the Tong clan, which was smaller than the Lotus clan and the others. He tried every trick to make Park Waiso forget Tong and Lee Jade and fall for someone young like him. Before walking away, Parkiso finally spoke back to the boy's rude words. He laughed, thinking only a blind fool or a desperate loser would speak such nonsense. And Kong Humu didn't seem to care a bit about what he just heard. When pushed once more, the old man readied his weapon for a fight, only to find he couldn't use the broken tool. Instead of the boy, Park Waiso lunged forward with his sword drawn. Right then, the boy's eyes went wide as he saw everything moving wildly around him. As Park Waiso trimmed a lock of his hair, he realized his deadly blade had already carved a deep wound in the wall behind him, sealing his fate. The man explained that many Tong clan members were stronger than him, especially Lai Jite, and thought it wasn't funny for someone barely at level 10 to talk that way. But the protagonist still couldn't see what made Lee Jae so special. When he heard that, the old man was shocked, but Kong Humu stared at his opponent with determination, ready to show everything he had. As power surged through him, he vowed to prove he was stronger than Lide. He curiously asked how much stronger he needed to get to stand up to the powerful man. In that instant, Parko saw that he was standing up for the stubborn kid. Even so, he explained that Lai Jae hit level 20 just 6 months after becoming a hunter. That's why someone like him could count on the Taong clan's help, which an ordinary person would never see for over a year. If the boy wanted to prove he was special, showing up was the bare minimum. So when the old man began packing to leave, Kong Humo shouted that he could do it all in just 2 weeks. He made sure the man understood he was far superior to Lide, hoping that would make him change his mind and work for him. But Parko thought the offer was just nonsense. He turned his back and warned that the place where the young man was training should be better than lights. He took quiet steps and moved further away, leaving the boy all by himself. Kong Himu smiled, but his heart was fixed on just one place. The ruined buildings stood as empty shells of time, but suddenly the protagonist rushed forward, fist clenched tight, ready to throw a punch. On the other side, the monster screams in rage. The boy is so fast that keeping up with him feels like an impossible race. As his enemy crashes to the ground, he launches a flurry of attacks, but the foe sees a chance to strike back by lunging forward with its mouth full of sharp teeth. Suddenly, it bites down hard on his hand. The young man didn't see it coming and felt pain shoot through his whole body. Still, he was sure he could win and reached his hand deep into the beast's throat. He felt great joy seeing all his fighting skills finally come together against it. As the monster fought back with all its might, Kong Humio laughed, making a joke about how nothing could escape once it went into the beast's mouth. Not long after, that trail of blood began to spread across the whole area. With the monster's head blown off and its jaw broken into pieces, the hero finally hit level 15. Just then, Arden, the conqueror, stared at the bleeding hand Kong Hayumu held, his own curiosity sharpening as he gazed up at the sky to find something new. Soon after, he thought back to the fight they just had. Once he'd wrapped up the wound, he finally admitted he had pushed his body too far. The fairy next to him nagged him about his butler fighting so bravely. Seeing Renian's changed look, A warrior asked her where she had been for so long. But the fairy looked way more worried about her friend's hand. She used a straw to try and drink his blood, but he didn't mind it because he knew he could come back to life if he died fighting in hell. Even better, things were starting to look up for him since he didn't have to rent out his secrets just to find monsters to fight. The only trouble was that red-hooded goblin from the first time he met it. Among every goblin he had fought, that one was still missing, and the red-hooded goblin might be the strongest of them all. While Kong Hiu was too distracted to notice the creature quietly walking toward him with a hook instead of an arm, he quickly jumped away the moment he spotted it. With fear in his heart, he yelled at Rena to duck and hide immediately. But the fairy had vanished long ago, leaving the hero all alone. Just as the beast started sniffing the pile of bodies, the red-hooded goblin let out a sudden, angry scream. Kong Hamu saw the creature staring back at him with pure rage burning in its eyes. The warrior, finding one of its own dead, shoved a weapon into its injured hand and charged without a word, while the goblin stood ready to kill the young man. Its terrifying face showed pure rage and a deadly desire to crush its enemy with its own hands. Not long after, the system told the hero they had died, and a fresh mission started right away. Cross a wooden bridge to defeat a black-handed goblin. Kong Haimu remembered his rival and saw that he had left the monster furious and ready to strike back. In that split second, he had no way to fight back and was forced to fall. Lying on the ground, he thought about the fight and realized it was just a goblin, so there was no need to worry. Determined to begin his new mission, he rose with a clever plan to lure the enemy into a deadly trap of sharp spikes and a deep hole. While the creature hurried forward with all the supplies needed for his plan, Kong Hea spun around to check the noise, only to die again after just 1 minute of surviving and running in despair across a wooden bridge on his 6th try while a goblin chased him non-stop. The monster, filled with rage, prepared to smash the warrior again. The young man's eyes burned with determination as he refused to lose again, so he used his gloves to strike back at the goblin, feeling a thrill that he had finally found a way to hurt it. But his joy didn't last long, for the creature swung a sharp sword right at him, and the hero realized he couldn't win and thought about running away the moment he was able to get back up. There is an old saying that revenge just fuels more revenge, while forgiveness is the only path to true victory. But Kong Himu would rather die than forget that goblin and waste his time trying to get stronger. He made sure no one could walk away with a clear conscience, punishing every bad choice they made. If someone tried to stab him in the back, he'd make them pay the same way, but if he kept running away instead, he'd eventually lose the fight against his own pride. As his mind wandered, the red chaos goblin strolled over the broken remains. After waiting so long that the cursed human thought he'd finally gone, he realized it was still too soon to get comfortable because his opponent could come back and was very tricky. He wanted to keep the human away from his kind. Suddenly, a monster with tears in its eyes started cursing. The beast arrived to tell his friend that everyone was dying. Someone poisoned the water, so the mighty goblin had to come back. The situation was desperate, with many goblins fighting for their lives while falling sick. Apparently, someone slipped poison into the water, so the villagers couldn't even eat the animals. And while the two argued over why anyone would be so cruel, Kursanen already knew who it was. His eyes flashed with fury as he realized Kong, who was the only one who could do it. The goblin was crushed with guilt for letting the young man escape when he should have killed him. Soon, another creature called out a curse, even though he knew he was terribly busy. But someone asked him to stay just to watch what was happening. The baby in his arms started crying louder and louder, searching for his cursed toy, while the father watched his son's eyes fill with tears. With a determined look, the red-hooded goblin took off running. His friend grabbed his arm to stop him from making a huge mistake. No matter how big their dreams were, they couldn't stop an enemy who could come back to life. The goblin urged us to drop the revenge plan and run away to a new home before the human caught us again. But Kursanen refused to accept that attitude and was ready to take revenge. When they realized they were talking to Kursanen, they knew they had no choice, and right then, one of the monsters spotted something odd that demanded their full attention. One of the scouts who had just come out was lying on the ground. As soon as they caught the stink of the poison, they knew it was a trap laid by a human. The smartest move is to rush back to the hideout because those clues the human left behind are just bait to trick them into wandering away from the others. Kursanen stayed outside to chase down the enemy, a goblin who bragged that he could kill the weaker foe with his eyes closed. Even though his friends were truly scared for him, Kursanen promised they would see him back alive from the fight. No magic or resurrection needed. He pushed forward with determination through the ruined land of the end of the world. He heard a sound coming his way. The goblin was quicker and used his hook to strike the weapon. Kursanen's eyes burned with rage as he vowed to make sure that human faced a terrible end, while Kong Himu stood ready behind them, waiting for the fight to start. He grinned with a cruel smile and told the goblin it had one more chance. However, he was playing with the enemy, claiming he was giving him a chance to die at his hands, while Kursanen, confused by what was happening, didn't understand what was going on. It looked like his opponent was just stalling to buy time. The human explained that if he used the poison to kill everyone, there would be no one left alive to see the result. Even though some of his people had died, he still didn't know what would happen next. Knowing he could come back to life, he wondered if the goblin would be smart enough to stop his death. Kursanen wanted to save the boy just long enough to cut off his arms and legs, making sure he would always regret what happened. Using his magic gloves to grip the goblin's blade and boasting that he could die and return, the hero could only threaten the enemy's family since he lacked the power to stop the danger. Kong Hanu only sought revenge on his enemies while keeping his innocent family safe, but as the attackers pressed harder, his plans changed and he was forced to throw his sword before the protagonist to protect his people. He was ready to give his own life just to keep his family safe. Without wasting a second, the young man said this was his biggest goal. That's why Kursanen demanded that he leave that place once and for all as soon as he killed him. Moreover,